Never a bad time, always a good time to talk about the Phoenix Suns with the season about a week and a half away. And joining us right now to talk a little Suns basketball, preview the season, and talk about what he thinks about them, the writer who covers the NBA for Yahoo Sports, Kevin O'Connor, joining us here on the Burns Gambo Show. Kevin, I'm Dave. You know Gambo. Welcome back to the show, man. How we doing?
I appreciate it. How you guys doing today?
Great. Loved your stuff on Ryan Dunn. Now, right before the draft, I always do a Gambo 5. I predict who the Suns are going to select. I give the fans 5 guys. I said it'll be one of these guys. The number 1 guy on my list was Ryan Dunn. I also had Tyler Kolek, Yves Missy, Khalil Ware, and I think Tyler Smith in that group. But Ryan Dunn was the guy they wanted. They actually traded down and got him. Didn't shoot the ball very well at Virginia, but he's shooting the ball very well right now. What do you love about what you're seeing out of Ryan Dunn?
I mean, what I love about what I'm seeing out of Ryan Dunn right now is the fact that he was a good prospect even with a crappy jump shot. I mean, at Virginia, he was a complete liability behind the arc, 7 of 35 from 3 last season at Virginia, only 5 for 16 as a freshman, so he was 23% in his 2-year career at Virginia. But despite that, he was still one of the best defensive players in the nation. I think he's one of the best defensive prospects to enter the draft in years. I think he is the best defender in this year's draft class. A great at-rim finisher, a good connective passer. He checked all of these different types of boxes as a good role player, except for the jumper. And so right now what we're seeing with the Suns, the fact is that he's, it's a small sample size. It's just preseason. You don't want to necessarily overreact, but 12 of 27 in 4 preseason games, more makes than he had all of last season, almost as many attempts as he did in all of last season in only 4 games. And it checks out in terms of the fact that prior to the draft, and I'm sure this is why the Suns liked him, prior to the draft, there were rumblings within league circles that people who saw him work out, people who were working with him, that Ryan Dunn had fixed his jumper, that he had gotten back to what he did more in the high school level. So everything we're seeing right now aligns with what people were seeing from him in workouts prior to the draft. So I'm really encouraged with what Ryan Dunn's doing right now. And if he does at least continue shooting above 35, 36% from 3, the dude's going to go down as the steal of the NBA draft.
Yeah, it's funny that you mention all of that pre-draft stuff because we were like hyper focused on him during the summer league to see that, right? To look for those results of that hard work that he was putting in. And I think he was 1 of 13, if I'm not mistaken, from the summer league.
Struggled.
And so it had us worried a little bit, like, hey, maybe it wasn't sticking. Maybe it wasn't there. In your opinion, based off of your experience, is it uncommon for a guy with such a spotty jumper to be able to, for lack of a better word, fix it as quickly as it appears that he at least might have?
It is uncommon. And the thing that's interesting with him is he struggles from the free throw line even still. I mean, he's only 50% from the line this preseason, and granted it's a small sample size. With him, you really have to go back to high school. When you look at his production at the high school level, he shot well above 30%. I'm not saying he was a knockdown guy in high school. He wasn't. But I believe his numbers were in the 35, 36% range in 4 years in high school. So it's not like he doesn't have a sample of having success as a shooter. So with Dunn, I think there's a level enough of belief in him that this progress that's happening now, especially with some tweaks to his lower body mechanics, may have helped him. Now, again, like small sample, he could collapse and go through a really cold streak again. But that's the thing, like with Dunn, even if he's not shooting, he can still be productive because he's such an athletic finisher. You can use him as a screener for Booker or KD or Beal. You can have him in the dunker spot. He doesn't need to shoot. So even if he's a streaky shooter, even if he has stretches like this, to me, that's what makes it so appealing when you're projecting him forward right now in the NBA, because he doesn't need to be a 40% guy for this to matter, this type of development.
I think in the immediate aftermath of getting swept by the Minnesota Timberwolves, everybody was down on the Suns. Didn't have a lot of maneuverability. They didn't have the draft capital. They didn't have the free agency money. They were very limited in what they could do with the second apron. And now all of a sudden you're seeing Kendrick Perkins came out and said the Suns are the dark horse. We've got an anonymous NBA executive saying the Suns are the best team in the West. I put a lot of that on Tyus Jones' ability to fix a lot of the problems. But what are you seeing as to why people are starting to turn around and kind of believe in the Phoenix Suns again?
I mean, I think you mentioned it, Tyus Jones. On my podcast today, me and my guest Dan, we talked about Ryan Dunn, but we also talked about Tyus Jones, where you had last year's Suns team with, multi-ball handler offense, no clear point guard. I was in Phoenix last training camp and talked to Frank Vogel, and he's like, yeah, Devin Booker sees himself as a point guard, but we're going to have a multi-ball handler offense, and it's going to work this way, and we're going to play fast and going to move the ball around. Well, that didn't happen. But with Tyus Jones, he brings the opposite end of the spectrum with what you had last year, with a guy who's led the NBA in assist-to-turnover ratio for 3 consecutive years. He can settle down the offense. He can run pick and roll. But even when Booker or Beal or KD have the ball in their hands and they're cooking, Tyus Jones is a 40+% guy on catch-and-shoot threes. He's a knockdown shooter, and he's a gritty, hard-nosed defender as well. So I think between him and Monty Morris coming off the bench, 2 more traditional point guards, it's pretty clear the Suns addressed their number one position of need and then factor in everything else. And this is the reason why people around the league are a bit more bullish on Phoenix this year. It's because of everything else that they brought in. Obviously, Royce O'Neal last year, drafting Ryan Dunn, bringing back Grayson Allen, now looking more buff. Even Oso Ighodaro as a backup center, a backup big man in this rotation. And I think with this Suns team, they just have more depth. They filled their needs, and they won 49 games last year despite guys missing games, despite the clunky system, and everything looks resolved now, and I see them as a team that's going to finish in the high 50s for wins. Podcast
host Kevin O'Connor from Yahoo Sports, our guest here on the Burns Gambo Show, and you just kind of led me right into my next question.
High 50s.
I was getting, if that's the ceiling for you, the high 50s, how realistic, what has to happen, do you think, for them to get there? What are the boxes that need to be checked for them to hit that high 50 mark that you think they can get to?
I mean, it's kind of cliche, but I think it's simply health. It really is. KD's 36 years old at this point. Granted, last year he played 75 games. He still has such a severe injury history. Beal obviously missed games last year as well. So it is still health. Other than that, I think it would be Yusuf Nurkic at the center position. Obviously, there's been, supposedly he's going to be shooting threes this year. I'll see it, and I'll believe it when I see it. I'm not sold on that. So I think it would really be the center spot. How much will the Suns have to play small? Will they have to go with Ighodaro coming off the bench more often? And I like him a lot, but he's still only a rookie. Or is that going to be a position where they have to make a trade and find some improvement there? So I'd say Nurkic is the biggest question mark for me from a roster standpoint, aside from health.
We've seen, and leave me with this, defensively they're going to be small. Like they're just going to be small.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is, like, the league has really, in the last few years, gone to length at the wing spot, having those long athletic wings. And they had Mikal Bridges here and Cam Johnson and Josh Jackson and Dragan Bender. They've had a lot of those guys over the years. They're kind of lacking in that department right now with those long wings that could guard multiple positions. Could that be the downfall for this team?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely another flaw as well, the lack of size, because they're going to be small a lot of the time when you're running lineups with Jones, Booker, and Beal out there, and then it's 36-year-old KD and as the help defender at the rim when Nurkic is defending. So, there's definitely concerns defensively with their lack of size, but I think the flip side of that is simply that can this offense be so great that the iffy defense doesn't matter as much?
Yeah.
Can the presence of a Ryan Dunn, who is a tremendous versatile defender who can protect the rim and add rebounding even at his size at 6'6", can they bring in, can they have the right lineup configurations that allow it all to click? Ultimately, I still think, whether lack of wing size or whether it's the Nurkic spot, there probably is at least one more move that needs to be made. And granted, there's not a lot of assets left. I do think with Phoenix, there's just one more missing piece. The only other thing I'd push back on with the lack of wing size is, how much does it really matter? Like when you look at Minnesota last year, they get through Phoenix and they get to a West Finals, but you got Jaden McDaniels and you got all these great wing defenders and you got all this size, but you still lose. You still lose to Luka. You still lose offensive players that are so great. Sometimes it doesn't matter how amazing of a defensive wing you have if you're just going to get cooked anyways, and that happens time and time again over the years, and that's why I think a lot of teams now are just leaning offense and saying, you know what, We'll figure it out on defense. These guys are going to lock in the defensive end come playoff time, and it's all going to not going to matter when nobody can stop us offensively. So that's the bet the Suns are making.
I like that answer quite a bit. Kevin, I know you squeezed us in between a bunch of busy stuff today. We really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on, man. We appreciate the insight.
I appreciate it, guys. Have a good day.
Thanks, Kevin.
Kevin O'Connor joining us from Yahoo Sports and host of the very popular podcast, High 50s on the Wins.
High 50s.
High 50s on the Wins. Ooh.
So Kellen Olson in there for a second. He got so excited.
Thanks for watching Burns Gambo. Click to see more from the guys and hit the button in the middle to subscribe so you never miss a video from Arizona sports.